Has any of you ever seen a Deltic? Having worked closely with the Class 37s on the MZ Railway, I always thought that they were big, but after seeing a Deltic firsthand and up close, they're monstrous. Impressive, but monstrous. The Class 55, for its 20-year commercial life, was easily the most powerful locomotive to ever grace British Rail. With it easily able to exceed 200 miles an hour, it was hoped that these behemoths would be the answer to the longer haul trips up and down the country. The twin 1650 horsepower engines were a perfect replacement for the ageing A4 fleet, and every detail screamed modern. With its front nose resembling those that you find on American locos, these Class 55s turned heads. The Deltics would rule the main line, but what about services closer to home? To help overcome this problem, a new engine was developed. It was officially called the Class 23s, but many would call it the Baby Deltic. Introduced in 1959, these locomotives retained all the same styling as its bigger brother. However, it was 17 foot shorter, and instead of the twin engines, the Baby Deltics had just one at 110 brake horsepower and were produced by English Electric at the Vulcan foundry. The locomotives had a boat wheel arrangement, which would allow for the locos to approach greater corners at higher speeds. As all the wheels were powered, the locomotive had better adhesion, ideal for the tighter corners of the smaller railways. The Baby Deltics had everything going for them, so why were there only 10 made? Well, they kinda didn't work that well. The singular engine caused problems right from the off, particularly with the timing belt. The problem started small, but when an inspection found cracking in the cylinder liner, the issue grew massive. A cracked cylinder liner cannot be a quick fix, and in almost all cases, the engine would have to be replaced. Almost as quickly as they went out, all 10 engines were recalled. In addition to this, outside the engine bay, drivers were reporting a whole host of problems, including issues with the gearbox to the cooling fans. Like a revolving door, all Class 23s were in and out of the sheds, and in 18 months of operations, all 10 locomotives had 44 engine changes between them. In 1961, British Rail held a meeting about the problem with English Electric. They needed these new engines to work and had spent too much money on them already. British Rail had heard of a new type of engine and wanted to trial it. English Electric disagreed, citing it would add extra unnecessary weight, and said that when the locomotives were on the tracks, they worked well. It wasn't exactly what BR wanted to hear. So British Rail simply didn't sign off on more new engines, so they decided to remain quiet. As each failed Baby Deltic rolled into Stratford Depot waiting repair, the yard quickly filled up, and it wasn't long before all 10 were back and waiting their fate. After much deliberation, it was decided that these engines needed another chance. This time a full programme was laid out to modify, refurbish and rejuvenate the class. Taking time over each part, the engines were repaired and modified to work specifically within the engine's frame. Outwardly, the nose ends received modifications too, with the removal of the discs to a roller 4-digit headboard box. They also changed the colour to match their bigger brothers. As they rolled out of the shed and trialled it, it appeared that the engine's problems were fixed. However, the coolant problem did remain. British Rail, though, had other plans. By the late 1960s, they were losing money to the roads, and the beaching cuts had done little to claw back revenue. It was decided that a full review of the diesel fleet was required, and a national plan was drawn. The Baby Deltics were first on the list, and BR was quick to earmark them for withdrawal. Besieged with problems and with no obvious cure, the Baby Deltics were facing the cutter's torch one by one, with the last, D5909, carrying a rare blue livery. D5901 had a small reprieve. serving the Railway Technical Centre, but it was replaced in 1977 with a Class 24 and quietly scrapped. You would have thought that it was the end of the Baby Deltic, but incredibly some parts of the Baby Deltic survived. When D5905 was scrapped in 1973, not all of her was destroyed. Her engine was put on a wagon and covered. Initially it was going to be used as a spare, but when D5901 was scrapped, the engine just remained untouched. Power Unit 388 T929 engine was then the very last remnant of the class, and there was only one place for unique engines, the National Railway Museum. The museum snapped up the engine and moved it to York in 1977 and put it in storage. It remained covered on its wagon for the better part of 25 years. In 2001, by sheer chance, the engine was rediscovered, and after initial checks proved it was in good condition. The person that uncovered it was part of a group that were looking to build the 11th Baby Deltic. The team negotiated with the museum, and after much deliberation, the museum agreed to transfer the engine into the Baby Deltic group's custody. The engine was carefully transferred to the Barrow Hill locomotive shed. They also bought an old Class 37 to put the engine in to try it. Work started in 2011, and 14 years later, the work of the dedicated volunteers was starting to pay off, and a new locomotive began to emerge. In June, the Society announced that the Baby Deltic would be a guest at the greatest gathering, where the public will be able to see what the volunteers have done and ask questions. Restoring an engine that's mostly complete is no mean feat, but rebuilding a locomotive just from an engine is something else, and full credit must go to the Baby Deltic Society for their hard work, and I'm really looking forward to meeting the Baby Deltic in person at the gathering. At least this little sweetheart won't intimidate me.